Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leigh Hancher. I'd like to welcome you together with my colleague Alberto Pototschnig to our FSR monthly debate, which is this month on the topic of the new gas package proposals on network tariffs, a rather perhaps unusual and unexpected proposal on cross-border tariffs. So it's, I think, already quite a controversial issue, and that I think is testified by the fact we have a very high participation in this debate today. So I'm sure everyone is anxious to hear the rationale behind it and the initial comments to the proposal. So we will welcome this afternoon two colleagues from DG Energy who will present the proposal to us. So Fedora Petit and Benedikt Klauser from DG Energy will kick off our discussion today. That will be followed by our colleague from the FSR and head of gas, Ilaria Conti, who will give some initial reactions to it. And then we will turn to a very distinguished panel today. And we're very pleased to have Csilla Bartok from ACER. We have Krist as president of Eurogas, vice president of Eurogas. We have Claude Mangin from ENTSOG, and then we have Claes from IFIEC. So we'll have a wide range of views and reactions in the panel discussion. So I'd first like to turn the screen over to our two colleagues from the European Commission. So Fedora and Benedikt, I don't know if you have a choice of who goes first, but I leave it to you. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. So my name is Fedora Petit. I'm here together with my colleague Benedikt Klauser. And why are we here, the two of us, you may ask, for a short introduction? Well, the hydrogen and decarbonized gas package covers many different areas. There are many different colleagues in the Commission who worked on this proposal. And whereas the team I'm in focuses more on the, let's say, the conventional gas system, Benedikt's team is looking more at the hydrogen aspects. So I will start today and give a bit of an introduction, say a few words about tariff reductions in the conventional gas system, and then Benedikt will continue to say a few words about hydrogen. So, well, before diving into this very specific topic and this very specific part of our package, let me take a very brief step back. So as you will know, the Commission has adopted many different initiatives as part of the so-called Fit for 55, all of which aim at reducing greenhouse gases by 55% by 2030. This includes the proposals for the Renewables Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive that were adopted last summer, but also the gas package that we are looking at today. And the objective of this gas package is really to ensure that the framework conditions are right for more renewable and low carbon gases to enter the market. And the provisions on tariffs that we're talking about today are one very specific element of this much broader proposal. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so when we were preparing the proposal and conducting the stakeholder consultations, the impact assessment, etc., we got the very clear message that tariffs are a barrier for entry for more renewable and low carbon gases, which is why the Commission has chosen to propose reductions to these tariffs. Now, as you can see on the map in front of you, there are different types of tariffs and tariffs reduction included in the package. I would like to split it in two and talk about the 75% reductions on the injection of renewable low carbon gas, as well as the 75% reductions for storage of gas first. So here the Commission set a fixed reduction tariff for these, or percentage for these elements. There's a number of reasons for this. It's, as I said, to remove the barriers, to also create a level playing field across Europe and have the same reductions across Europe. It's also to avoid that national regulatory authorities are being drawn into climate policy discussions and to protect their independence with regard to tariff setting. And it also ensures that these tariffs are not considered as constituting state aid. So a few elements there. Now, whilst we think this is the right proposal at the right time, we now have very low levels of renewable and low carbon gases in the grids. We see that with increased volumes, there might be certain issues that could arise, redistribution issues or others. And this is why the Commission has included a review clause for this specific part of the proposal. And now let me move to the second type of reductions. No, it's still on the same slide, I'm sorry. So this is the cross-border, on the cross-border tariffs and the entry tariffs to LNG terminals. So here there is actually not a reduction, but a removal of these tariffs. And I think this, we have to see this very much from an internal market perspective. So we see there are quite significant price differences in the production of renewable and low carbon gases in Europe. And we are very keen to ensure that they can be produced where this is most economically interesting and be traded across Europe in an easy fashion. So this much to the rationale. Now, we fully understand that this has impacts on the revenues of the TSOs. This is also why we propose to monitor this very closely and also foresee that inter-TSO agreements, compensation mechanisms would have to be negotiated if the revenues decrease by more than 10%. So also in the interest of time, I think I will leave it at that for the moment and hand over to my colleague Benedikt to say a few words about hydrogen.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon. If you could move to the next slide, please. So we just heard about the transport of renewable gases in the natural gas system. What about pure hydrogen networks? The current directives are not applicable to dedicated hydrogen networks, and it is why the Commission has proposed a new regulatory framework specifically for such dedicated hydrogen networks. And while I say these rules are new, they are still to a large extent based on the same proven regulatory principles that apply to natural gas and electricity. That is unbundling, separation of production and transport. That is third-party access, to ensure a level playing field for all market participants, and to ensure that even more, the regulation of network access tariffs based on the actual costs of operators. And you will find these same principles in the proposal also for hydrogen networks. Now, why do we not just extend the directive and the regulation to hydrogen networks and call it a day? It's because there are key differences between hydrogen and natural gas and electricity, of course, in terms of their production, their applications, and of course the state of market development, which warranted a different treatment. And so I've wanted to highlight some of the key elements in the proposal which take into account of these differences. So first is we see hydrogen being used primarily by industrial actors in the beginning, as opposed to a comprehensive switch of EU households to hydrogen. And that's why the rules will not distinguish between transmission and distribution in the sense of the natural gas network. So we have one set of rules for all hydrogen networks. Secondly, hydrogen is obviously still an emerging market, and we see a need for regulatory flexibility in the ramp-up phase. That is why member states can opt for so-called negotiated third-party access until 2030. This has a direct impact on tariffs because it means that tariffs will be bilaterally agreed between the operators and the users, and as a result, regulators will not have to establish and approve the actual cost of the hydrogen network operators before 2030. Thirdly, the proposal envisages that the network tariff at interconnection points between member states will be zero, meaning that shippers would only pay a possible auction premium when shipping hydrogen across member states' borders. This will help improve liquidity and hopefully allow for the creation of a true common European hydrogen market. And finally, the current principle of a separation of accounts and a prohibition on cross-subsidization remains the default rule. The specificity is that in view of the need to ramp up hydrogen infrastructure quickly, the proposal envisages the possibility of cross-financing of network infrastructure via temporary levies on other network types, but only subject to certain conditions and approval by the national regulator. And I think I will leave it at that, at this brief overview. But of course, we're both happy to answer questions that might come up during the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was extremely clear. We're seeing in the chat there are questions coming through already quite rapidly. So in the interest of time, however, I'd like to move directly to Ilaria Conti's presentation for the first reactions from the FSR. Ilaria, screen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leigh. I hope my screen is visible and correctly visible. Okay. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for this interesting debate, and thanks to Fyodor and Benedikt for already explaining very clearly what the topic of today is. In my few slides, I will probably repeat some of the points they already made, and you will see that rather than initial considerations, I have come up with lots of questions that hopefully Fyodor and Benedikt and also the other speakers will debate and help us clarifying. I heard indeed more questions until now on the recent provisions on tariff rather than statements, and this is probably a good sign already. Questions coming also from participants in our ongoing online training course on European gas network codes. And I have to thank actually both the instructors and the participants, because in preparing my presentation today, I actually took inspiration from the debates we had last week on in the specific week, in the specific module devoted to the discussion on the tariff network code. First of all, an overview of the main changes. These have been already brought to our attention by Fyodor and Benedikt. Compared to the current text, actually, some of the main changes we already said regard the hydrogen networks, where negotiated third-party access could be applied until 2031, and then regulated third-party access will we will have the switch to regulated third-party access. In this, we can read a clear vision from the Commission in, as Benedikt also explained, as a sort of ramp-up phase until 2030, and then the vision for a more mature hydrogen network. And in fact, after 2031, there will be an entry-exit system in place also for hydrogen networks and no application of interconnection points tariffs. Another important provision concerns the fact that NRAs, so the national regulator authorities, will have to provide, this is really a novelty, for the first time, a long-term assessment of tariffs until 2050. So according to Article 17 of the regulation, NRAs will have to, in approving the tariffs, they will have to take into account also national energy and climate plans, the decline of the gas demand, and the scenarios underpinning the 10-year network development plan. Another important novelty we just discussed, the specific discounts applying on the capacity-based tariff for renewable and low-carbon gases, all included in Article 16. So up to 75% discount for entry points and storage entry and exit points, and 100% for all interconnection points and entry at LNG terminals, based on a proof of sustainability. And we will see later in more details what this means. So on the first point, tariffs for renewable and low carbon gases, there is, as we said, up to 75% reduction. What are the conditions? The conditions are that the Commission reserves itself the right to re-examine this provision after 5 years from the entry into force. It is an ex post discount, and it is applicable, as we said, also to storage facilities, unless connected to more than one transmission or distribution network and used to compete with an interconnection point. There is also an option for regulators to set a discount rate which is lower than 75%, but this has to be in line with the general tariff principles and cost reflectiveness. On the second point, on discounts, so the 100% reduction on transmission across interconnection points, these apply, as we said, also apply both to interconnection points within the EU, the internal ones, and also those with third countries, as well as entry points at LNG. The conditions in this case, as we said, are the fact that there needs to be a sustainability certificate, which is better described under Articles 29 and 30 of the directive. The discount could be applied only to the shortest possible route. And there is, it's provided an inter-TSO compensation mechanism if a certain TSO incurs in more than 10% reduction in its overall revenue by applying these discounts. The package also, the regulation also specifies that subsequent details required for implementation will be covered in a network code in line with Articles 53 of the gas regulation. So, as I said, we came up mainly with questions about these new provisions, questions and hypotheticals. First of all, these discounts talk about renewable and low carbon gases. And the very first question would be how to define these renewable and low carbon gases. What do we mean in particular? Now, the recent package provided already big clarity, much more clarity on the definition of low carbon gases, low carbon hydrogen, low carbon fuels. And for renewable, it also it links back to the RED II definitions. However, we also know that the methodology to define renewable and low carbon gases is mandated to a delegated act to be published in 2024. This according to Article 8 of the directive. So how can we apply these discounts and certification until then? That's the first question. Also, another question arising concerned the existing of some discounts that are voluntary discounts, but they are already in place. So the question is how these voluntary discounts will match with the new discounts provided. So, for example, storage discount, there is a currently discount, an ex-ante discount on storage, which is between 50 and 100%. Will the new provisions override it? That's another question. Also, there is an important question on cross-subsidization, was partly clarified already by Benedikt. It can happen only until certain specific conditions, but what could be the impact of the new measures? Will they encourage blending over private networks or dedicated networks or other applications? This is obviously an open question that we do not have the answer for. And last but not least, what we will see in the future energy system, in the future gas system, is certainly a new heterogeneous mixture of gas, which will be probably quite difficult to track and trace. So the question is this going to be the system? Are we expecting that, for example, TSOs track and trace the mixture of gas flowing in the pipelines? Who will be responsible for gas quality, so for purity, safety, the level of hydrogen blended into the gas? Or are we thinking of including the blending in the system, therefore re-separating again hydrogen from the other gas after injection? And also, what is the interaction with the distribution network? Particularly, some participants in the course were asking what's going to happen with reverse flow. So in case gas will have to be injected into the network from the DSO level to the TSO level, who will monitor the injection and will be responsible for the correct injection. Last but not least, gas is currently traded by volumes, and we know that the percentage of methane in a blended mixture will certainly be lower. So how will this impact, in fact, energy bills of final customers? And I'm sorry for raising too many questions, perhaps, but I hope it stimulates the debate in the next hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ilaria. I just put my video on, sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Well, you did raise lots and lots of questions, so I think we have lots of food for debate, and there's lots of questions, supplementary questions coming up on the chat. Alberto, did you want to say anything about the proposal for the inter-TSO compensation mechanism based on your long experience with a similar system in the electricity sector? Maybe just briefly before we turn to the panelists.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have some experience in the electricity sector. In fact, the inter-TSO compensation mechanism is still temporary. I think almost 20 years after it was introduced. It lost a bit of traction with the new method for paying for new infrastructure, with the cross-border cost allocation methodologies, with the 10-year regulation. So it was left a bit behind in the debate. It was also the infrastructure part was also only capped to 100 million. So, it seems to be sort of left behind there in a corner. It was heavily debated at that time, and now it seems that people have sort of lost interest in it. It's still obviously applied every year, but it refers to now old assets which probably are already depreciated. So, but lessons are learned, and in fact, we will have one question in the polls about to what extent we can learn from that lesson in setting up any ITC mechanism which might be needed in the future. But we'll leave it for the polls, I guess.
Thank you very much, Alberto. So let me now turn to our panel discussion, and we will start the discussion with contribution from Csilla Bartok, team leader for gas markets and energy retail at ACER. So Csilla, the screen is yours for the coming 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon to all the participants. We see, I would like to start with the objectives of the removal of cross-border tariffs. And the way we see at ACER that the rationale behind the provision is that there is an aim to facilitate EU flows of renewable and low carbon gases, and to push for the competition between biogas producers. So we see the high level objectives, but of course we also have more specific elements about the schemes, which I would try to highlight. One of the points we definitely appreciate is that there is this sustainability proof that is needed for those gases that are discounted. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, we see that there is a complex scheme that needs to be called in, and that may create some difficulties on the way of its application. There is another element that we may see, that maybe end users may want to play the system, so they would have kind of economic incentives to push volumes across the border rather than use it locally or immediately. So those economic incentives need to be thought of, considered, especially when the review takes place. The other element is what Ilaria also mentioned, that the discounts are provided on the shortest route, and this is not always the most economical route where the gas is flown. I mean, we have seen that for the traditional fossil gases, that not always you take the shortest routes, you may take other ones. We have some questions as well on the level of the support. And I think that's quite interesting. We are quite aware that eventually the subsidy schemes are quite strongly led by national support schemes. And those are eventually leading in when it comes to subsidies in general, if you add up all the subsidies that renewable assets receive. So the question is, like what level of support this cross-subsidization would offer, and how will exactly make low carbon gases more competitive. Then carrying on, we also see that there is an aim to facilitate the access of these low carbon gases or renewable gases to the VTP, that is facilitated by the language of the legislation. And we need to take into account that we have different balancing regimes across the country, so that may trigger debates and concerns, how those aspects between distribution and transmission will be resolved. So maybe there are more texts needed or more debates could be expected. We really appreciate that there is a longer term sort of viability, visibility that is required by the NRAs. The NRAs are required eventually to provide a longer term visibility about gas tariffs and costs. And I think this will become very, very important as at the moment when gas will slowly exit the energy mix. So that element we find very important, and we appreciate I think it's important that there is an understanding about the future evolution of the tariffs. And it's also important that there's also benchmarking of the TSOs so that the efficiently incurred costs are taken into account, and so that there is a true exit for the gas from the energy mix. I think the ITC element, it will be challenging. This is how we see it. It's not only from the electricity experience, I think from any experience that comes to ITC and bigger pots of money, it's a big discussion. And so, whereas on the one hand, you know, there will be the TSO whose revenues will be eroded to 10%, that TSO could call then for an ITC negotiation with all the neighboring TSOs. And they have 3 years for that until then, until the point when the NRAs will come into the debate. And maybe we may need to debate whether there is a need to wait for the 3 years, whether it should not be this discussion a little bit sort of better managed earlier on. So that's an important element here. We appreciate that the NRAs are part of this debate. We also appreciate that ACER can intervene in case of disagreements. I think those situations may occur in such controversial debates. We appreciate the gradual approach. So the 5-year review, I think that's useful. I think it needs to be reflected upon whether and how the system works, whether it's economical and whether it makes sense. Moving on to hydrogen, I think the rationale is the same, is practically to facilitate cross-border flows of hydrogen. This is why the discounts would apply. What we would miss that there should be an explicit mentioning of an ITC for also for hydrogen. I think it starts with cross-border projects and CBCAs, and that's very important because initially the hydrogen market will start up with a few projects, but it will be important to a little bit set the targets for the hydrogen developers that an ITC may come their way as well. We appreciate that financial transfers are conditions between natural gas assets and hydrogen. I think NRAs would play a very important role here. And it's very important that the legislation explicitly mentions that cross subsidies should not occur. I think that would be a provision that needs to be kept. We are happy to provide recommendations every 2 years on the determination of the value of the assets that are transferred and some further calculations. So that probably will be important to keep a proper transition, how these assets, how the old gas assets would be repurposed, reused, and it is done in an affordable, economical manner. And this is where I would like to finish my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's move now on to Annie Krist from Eurogas, who will give her first reactions to the proposal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leigh and Alberto, for asking me to be on this panel. Indeed, I am Vice President of Eurogas. My contribution will be a bit from the shipper's point of view, I suppose, and also from my own long-term experience in the European gas market, also on the TSO side, by the way, but in particular in the Netherlands. Let me take one step back first. I think that we all are very concerned about the progress of reducing emissions in the gas sector. On the other hand, I would dare to say that bottom line, I am very optimistic. Looking at the gas package, it shows where we stand after 5 years. I think we've made more progression than we would have thought 5 years ago. My points for this panel are threefold. Little step back, what do we have achieved, the what? Second, the top-down approach, the how, some comments on that, some questions I have there as well. and then in the end a small bottom-up approach from the shipper's point of view. I think that the gas package takes on some very serious matters in a very progressive way. We all know that it's very difficult to manage all efforts towards decarbonization in little time, very little time, with proper market functioning. And I recognize that with this gas package, the role of gases and the gas market at least are acknowledged in the transition to the net zero future. And of course, the acknowledgement of the using of existing infrastructure rather than building new ones is very well reflected. The idea of almost fading out, fading in, very well reflected and appreciated. And I find a pride in Dutch repositioning to gas by design, where we actually did the same with biogas and hydrogen as cornerstones of the vision of the future market. So I think that the discussions we have today are not only very necessary, but also energizing. And I think we always should keep that in mind as well. The second point is on the how. It surely takes a very top-down perspective of designing the market of the future. And my question is, might practice not prove to be less mendable towards achieving the goal than we think it is? Or my conviction is that the way we manage the transition will, in the end, determine the success of the end state. And the top-down approach, we might face some difficulties in relying fully on a top-down approach and not giving the opportunity for regional initiative, regional approaches to get it going. Some questions on this top-down approach. We will have no cross-border tariffs. So in effect, de facto, a single European market for hydrogen. And of course, it's striking because that's at least different from how the natural gas market is developed. And I question myself, does this approach for the hydrogen market reflect the nature of gas markets? Or did we simply copy-paste the electricity market? Or are we thinking of an integrated market? It seems to be a clear redesign of the gas market by transportation tariffs for renewable and hydrogen markets. The discount on entries will lead to the fact consumers paying at the exit points. We need, I think, a more harmonized approach not only on available transportation capacity and how to use that, but also on supply and indeed demand, because we need to step up in this transition. We need to develop volumes. And that brings me to my third concern. I would almost say that it seems as if we are relying on tariffication issues as the tool for the Commission to direct behavior in the market. But tariff reductions for sustainable gases, I mean, I can understand it, especially when we talk about TSOs. They are regulated entities. So it's in a way, it's the easiest thing to take a top-down approach from there. On the other hand, we will need much more and more and more than just some discounts on tariffs to get the market going. And then, finally, one remark, if I may. I question the other tariff discount in the proposals, which is on LNG terminals, because I think that this may not reflect the European equality that we stand for or stood for. So I hope that matters do not become overly political, but rather that the incentives for change are at the right place. Concluding, ambitious gas package providing clarity on gas markets of the future, the what, but at the same time leaving some questions open that will in the end define the successful transition, and that's the how to get there.
Thank you very much, Annie. I think a good warning there, not perhaps to be too top down, something also to come back to in the polls. Let me turn now to for another view from Claude Mangin from ENTSOG.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I will comment the discount on the gas network and on the hydrogen network, and talk about some implementation issue and maybe side effect, but it's not a final position of ENTSOG. It's just to trigger the discussion and to see if we have the same understanding. So I will make 3 points. First point, the ex post discount for renewable and low carbon gases. How could we implement that? I take an example. Let's say I'm a French biomethane producer. I'm selling biomethane to a trader in Belgium, and that trader in Belgium sell it to a German end user. The text says that the discount goes on the shortest route, so it's from France to Germany, but maybe neither the producer, the trader, or the end customer will have capacity at the French-German border. And who will benefit from the discount? Is it the producer, the trader, or the end user? So it makes it very complex to implement, because in the same pipeline, you will ask us to track and trace or differentiate low carbon and renewable gases and natural gases. We favor a discount at the injection point of a producer because it's easy to do, and the 75% discount is fine at the injection point. Our members are already doing it, and they are doing also discount on the connection fee to connect the plant to the network. And there is no issue there, but once we have to differentiate, aren't we going to split the market between a gas market and a low carbon and hydrogen, low carbon and renewable market? And we are advocating with other associations for another solution, a guarantee of origin plus sustainability certificate or the information on greenhouse gas emission. A biomethane producer on a DSO network can already sell his biomethane everywhere in Europe by transferring his guarantee of origin from its national registry to another national registry. And this is a solution that exists and that would be cheaper to implement. And last point on that, isn't there a political issue with the discount of the entry point from third country and exit country? Because let's say a supplier from the east border, from our east border, will be able to ship gas to the UK to ship renewable and low carbon gases for free, or from the north, from our north border to south east of Europe for free, paid by EU citizen. So this could be also an issue. So this is for my first point on the ex post discount on a theoretical route. The second issue is more for the hydrogen network on side effect on having a IP tariff at 0 for between balancing zones. So aren't we going to create artificial congestion? Because if the capacity is for free, a shipper could book all the capacity in Europe, and all the other shipper will have to wait the day before they ahead to that use it or lose it mechanism kicks in, or buy it on a secondary market. It's it's a bit unusual, I think. And solution on that could be a voluntary merge of balancing zone where you make disappear the point, and you will also remove the need for an ITC mechanism. And that's my third point, the implementation issue of an ITC mechanism. And this one is for the gas network discount for low carbon and renewable gases, and for the hydrogen network discount. Are we going to renegotiate or recalculate that discount every time the share of renewable and low carbon gases will rise somewhere in Europe? Every time the flow pattern will change, if a new steam methane reformer with carbon capture and storage is going live, it will change the flow pattern in Europe, and so we'll have to recalculate that all the time, and the exit point to end user, that tariff will change accordingly, and so this is maybe too volatile. The same for the hydrogen network. Each time we are going to connect a cluster or hydrogen valley to the backbone, we'll have to recalculate that ITC mechanism, and with which lead time. And for that one, again, we propose what we did in gas, voluntary merge of balancing zone, because each balancing zone is a trade-off between a lot of features of the market, and having a top-down approach and a one-size-fits-all will change all these national trade-offs. And instead of voluntary merge with a voluntary ITC mechanism, regional one would be an easier solution. And yeah, I will finish by quoting the explanatory memorandum says that only few stakeholders support the removal of intra-EU cross-border tariffs. And indeed here, aren't we putting together two issues, promoting renewable and low carbon gases where everybody is in favor of it. And as I say, the easiest way is to have feeding tariff, carbon contract for difference, and a discount on injection point, and maybe on connection fee. And the pancaking topic that we left with the Covadis study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've really raised a lot of questions as well. And we've heard in many of the comments, well, what about the users? And I think we will hear now what the users think about the proposals. So I'd like to give Peter Claes the screen to comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leigh. And well, at this stage, essentially, we are energy users. Hopefully, also in the future, hydrogen users, if we can start using it as an energy carrier. But I have a few reflections of my own, and the first is a bit more general on the purpose of this initiative of the Commission to contribute to the creation of a hydrogen market. And let's be clear, we do support the initiatives to push hydrogen as a future energy carrier in the energy transition. It's very clear that we will need it as one of the solutions. But let's be fair. I mean, we're looking at the system where we are supporting renewable energy sources, and we will continue to do so. Or we are supporting CCS, CCU installations, also in order to have the capacity to make either green hydrogen or blue hydrogen in a not too far future. Then we're going to probably have to support the electrolyzers or other installations that we're going to need to transform the excess of electricity into hydrogen, or to extract or to use the CCS, CCU installations to produce blue hydrogen. We are also going to force energy consumers to use green hydrogen. I mean, in the red, we go up to 50% of green hydrogen as an obligation to use that. We're going to support infrastructure to be built for hydrogen transport or storage in the different infrastructure facilities and programs of the Commission. Then we're going to say, well, 75% of injection of green hydrogen, maybe also blue hydrogen, is going to be exempt from paying for the capacity that is to be put there. And then last but not least, we're going to say we're going to cross-subsidize the use of the hydrogen infrastructure by probably what is today paid for the natural gas infrastructure. So that's, well, and then all that we're going to call a market, a hydrogen market. I think we have to reflect on the whole of the picture and make sure that we are not, well, overacting here and pushing hydrogen in too many ways. We had a term for that in the electricity cross-border allocation also, Alberto. It was called pancaking back then. If we add up all these support mechanisms, well, let's remain rational. That's the main message. By the way, the cross-subsidization, I really don't like. I think this is something surprising that the Commission proposes cross-subsidization, while in the whole process of liberalizing the energy markets, this has been one thing to avoid in the history of liberalization. On the specific proposal of tariffs, two comments on cross-border tariff. I really do support the idea to have a clear, transparent, efficient, and pragmatic system from the start. I have also been following the discussions on inter-TSO compensation in the electricity system, and until today, 25 years after the start of the liberalization process, this is a difficult discussion. This leads to very complex calculations and discussions between TSOs. So I'm not saying that this is the best solution, but let's start with a good solution so that we can avoid all these discussions in the future. A second reflection on the 75% reduction. Again, we understand that we have to do something to promote hydrogen, and specifically green hydrogen and other low carbon hydrogen in the immediate future. But the question is also who's going to pay for the part that is not paid for by the low carbon hydrogen. Is it going to be paid for by the gray and brown hydrogen that is injected in the system? And will it then be still interesting enough for those actors to inject that type of hydrogen into the system? Will they say, well, okay, the tariff has now become so high that it's not interesting anymore to inject it in the system? So this is something you have to reflect upon. Or is it going to be paid on the exit side, which might mean that it becomes too expensive again for hydrogen users to use hydrogen out of those grids? So I think it's one thing to say we have a reduction in tariff for a certain category of users, but then you also have to answer the question where the money is going to come from, because the cost of the infrastructure of the capacity, of course, is not going to be lower because you exempt part of the users of the system. I think I'm going to leave it there as first reactions to this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So that completes then our first round of reactions. So perhaps, Alberto, could I hand the screen to you now to conduct our polls today?
Yes, thank you, Leigh, and thank you for all the initial statements. So yes, we prepared three polls, three questions with multiple answers. Speakers won't be able to vote, I'm sorry. Chiara, could you show the first one, please? The first one has to do with the removal of inter-TSO, of charges at interconnection points. As we heard, this is a proposal of the Commission for low carbon and renewable gases, including hydrogen. This is already the case for electricity. So the question is, would you favor the same approach being extended to all gases? So you choose A if you think that this is the case, as this will increase the level of integration of the internal gas market. You choose B if you think that this should not happen, so there should be no extension, as there is no point in changing the tariff structure for a market, the sort of traditional gas whose volumes are likely to decline in the future. You choose C if you think that this should not be the case, the same approach should not be extended to all gases, since the entry-exit charges reflect the cost of providing transport services, and you choose D if you have no views on the subject. So please vote. We leave a few seconds to vote. Right. It seems that the majority of respondents believe that the same approach should not be extended because the current charges are actually reflecting the cost of transport services. I think this will be for the panelists to comment on. So we'll go to the second poll, and it has to do with the inter-TSO compensation. We've heard already comments on it, which may be used to be put in, which would need to be put in place to allow TSOs providing tariff discounts to renewable and low carbon gases to recover their allowed revenues. Do you see any challenge in setting this up? So you choose A if you think that the main challenge would be to determine how much each TSO should receive from the inter-TSO compensation mechanism. You choose B if you think that the main challenge is determining how much each TSO should pay into the ITC mechanism. You choose C if you think that both how much they should pay and how much they should receive would be challenging. You choose D if you believe that there won't be sort of problematic aspects because we have experience, including from the electricity sectors, and you choose E if you think that, well, if you don't have a view. So please vote. Okay, excellent. Well, it seems there will be problems everywhere, and this is a very large majority. So again, I think it reflects also some of the intervention we had so far. Thank you very much. And then the last one. Yeah, the last one is that is about the proposal for some sort of some degree of cross-subsidization of the nascent hydrogen network. And question is, to what extent do you think this possibility should be used? You choose A if you think that cross-subsidization of gas network users by gas network users of the hydrogen network should be the main way of supporting the development of the hydrogen network. You choose B if you think that this network, to the extent it needs to be subsidized, should be done by the public budget, because at the end of the day, hydrogen is developed to enable decarbonization, which is a public policy objective. You choose C if you think that the hydrogen network should not be cross-subsidized and therefore should be paid by its users. And you choose D if you think, if you don't have views. Oh, that's interesting. Well, we have a very, I think, very well spread answers. I think, there is a slight majority of respondents believing that the public budget should step in. The public budget is always a good source of funding anyway. So I think there is a lot to talk about, and maybe we could have a first round of quick reactions from the panelists and also the speakers. First part, including Benedikt and Feodora. But Leigh, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. So let's indeed move to a discussion of these results, and perhaps the Commission representatives would like to comment first. Still on. Benedikt,
please go ahead.
Like to choose one of the topics, the polls to comment on.
Yes, thank you, Leigh. I mean, thank you very much, and thanks for the very interesting presentations and comments that we've already heard. I think what we would really see here that there is no clean-cut answer when it comes to the nitty-gritty, the implementational questions, and with discussing tariffs today, we are already in the midst of the nitty-gritty, of course, and here we're always faced with trade-offs. As speakers have said, the Commission proposal has at its core, at its objective, the promotion of renewable gases and decarbonization, and it proposes and accepts some trade-offs to this end. I think when we're talking about the financing of new infrastructure, again, these are new assets that will have to be financed and will have to reflect on the most efficient and equitable way of procuring this financing. But yeah, it won't be for free, and there will be trade-offs. So I think it's very difficult to make everybody happy with this type of proposal, but at the same time, this kind of debate that we're having today is extremely important also for us, for the Commission, to reflect again on what the best way forward is. And it's important also because these type of debates will obviously shape also the course of discussions that we will have in Parliament and in Council. So thank you very much for that, and we'll certainly take good note of all the questions that we got today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Theodora, would you like to comment too?
I guess you hear me better. So I wouldn't want to comment in addition on the polls, but if this would be the moment to also answer some of the questions, or that would maybe be later, because I saw there were many in the chat. So I'd be happy to do that now or later.
If you'd like maybe to pick a couple of questions that would that you'd like to respond to.
Yeah, because I started noting them down, and it's a lot. So I think some of them, yeah, I'll take some of them. So I think this question kept coming up, the impact of on the end user, on the consumer, etc. And indeed, I think this is a very important point. I think I tried to say in the introduction that we think this is the right proposal at the right moment in time. Currently, the levels of renewable and low carbon gases are very low. And so we think that as the volumes grow, this is indeed something that would gain in importance and that we would have to keep an eye on. And as I said, there is a review clause to this end in the proposal, and it's in there exactly for because of that, because we think this is a very important point that we shouldn't lose sight of. Then there were questions whether the discounts apply to gas and hydrogen or just gases. So here it applies to gases, so renewable and low carbon gases that are injected into the natural gas system. So this could be hydrogen if it is injected into the natural gas system. So we know there's a lot of terminologies in the proposal. It's not always straightforward to follow, but so it's hydrogen if injected into the natural gas system, and if renewable and low carbon. Then there was a question whether the storage reductions would override the current reductions in the tariff network code, and yes, this if adopted in the current form, the secondary legislation overrides what is in the network codes. Also, there was a question where the reduction applies, whether this is TSO level, DSO level, that it wasn't clear from the proposal itself. So this is really where the renewable low carbon gas is injected. So it can be either TSO or DSO level. And I think I could go on for another while, but I see there are many speakers. So I hope at least I was able to clarify some of the questions that people had.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, I think that's very important to have that clarification, as that helps with the debate too. Ilaria, did you want to comment at this stage?
Well, at this stage, I can just say thank you very much to Theodora, because she basically answered most of the questions I had in my slides. And yes, no, and I think it's a great discussion so far. There's also a side discussion in the chat, which was generated by a previous question on the quo vadis, but also it was in one of the questions Alberto asked, one of the polls, whether the new gas system should have basically no charging at IPs, at internal IPs. So yeah, in fact, although this was an original idea already proposed a few years ago, it never saw the light, in fact. So it's probably not correct to say that it did not work back then, because it was never applied, and it's probably brought to the discussion now that the situation of the scenario has changed thanks to the integration of renewable and low carbon gases that we are all witnessing. So I think it's still worth discussing. Maybe it will never see the light again, but I think we are back. It's back to the discussion table for sure.
Thank you. I mean, I think it was interesting that the poll results on that last topic seemed to indicate that the current system was cost reflective, and there was a reluctance perhaps to move away from it. Csilla, would you like to comment on any of the polls? I think cross-subsidization is something that's going to be a big concern by the looks of it.
I think it's very interesting, the first poll, in the sense that this discussion comes back and forth concerning, and that includes also natural gas, like all gas is everything that we use. This is a debate that from time to time comes back. I think it's interesting that stakeholders that know the current system are very happy with what they have, and they don't really want to change it. And I think this was also discussed in Madrid after reviewing the tariffs, also at the level of the agency. Users are quite satisfied with what balance is stricken in terms of subsidies, the cost reflectivity, transparency in particular. So I think the first question eventually reflects satisfaction with the old design, I would say. And on the other ones, maybe I would just give the floor to the colleagues, and then maybe we can go by the polls one to one. I don't know how you want to organize it, Leigh.
Okay, no, that's fine. So maybe Annie, would you like to reflect on any of the polls? You were very interested in the how.
Yeah, well, let me start off by saying that although I was not allowed to vote, I secretly did so, and I had exactly the same results as the public panel. So I don't know what that says about me or about the 150 participants, but anyway. I can see that when it comes to that there might be a slight tendency to favor that what we have. I do agree on that. 2 remarks. Oh no, 3 remarks. The discussion about the IPs. I saw some references, for example, by Andre to Quo Vadis. It was a sort of aha erlebnis, I must say. It was never applied. I don't know whether it would really be of help to apply it now. There are all sorts of issues when leaving the entry-exit system as we have. Would it lead to hoarding? So I think besides the inter-TSO part, we would have other discussions as well. In general, I see that a lot of the work that has been done seems to be focusing really on fiscal flows. This whole debate about the shortest route, for example, it seems as if we would be able to follow every single molecule in the pipeline system itself, and then determine what the transportation tariff would be. And I think we managed to really get the gas market going. So the commercial part, the non-physical part of it, and we should keep that in mind as well, because the functioning of the market is very important to get sustainable gases into that market. It's not only about transportation and transportation costs. Then on the cross-subsidy, yeah, it has to. I mean, in general, I think that if the word says it already, it's a subsidy, and I think that if it's a subsidy, generally that should come from public money. So general public subsidies and not by cross-subsidy. On the other hand, in my introduction, I used the wording phasing out, phasing in. So, I mean, I can understand there's some tendency towards users of the gas system sort of paying for the gas system of the future, but well, it will not be sufficiently, and it should not boil down to only the gas shippers paying for the gas system of the future. Oh yeah, and then on the TSO, DSO thing, yeah, I still have a bit of difficulties in seeing that as well. If we now would say that we sort of redesign the gas system and then say that we don't see any distinction anymore between the TSO level and the DSO level when it comes to, for example, hydrogen or unbundling issues or whatever. I think that would be a big leap forward. And again, I don't know whether we will able to make such giant leaps. I'll leave it to that, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Will indeed be interesting. There's some very giant leaps, perhaps, to be leaped. Peter, can I turn to you?
Yeah, thank you, Leigh. Very, very briefly, on the interconnectors, I already mentioned it in my presentation. I think the essence of interconnectors is to make market integration work, and let's look at solutions to avoid very complex and difficult discussions on how to distribute revenues from either congestion or interconnection revenues. Let's avoid that kind of discussion. Let's find solutions as soon as possible in the process, because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get to come to a solution. On the financing of hydrogen developments or grids by essentially natural gas grids, I already mentioned it also in my presentation. I would say yes. I mean, I would say please do not do that. That's just the type of cross subsidization that you want to use. And by the way, the hydrogen users in the future are going to be probably different players than natural gas players today. There will be some new and some will no longer use hydrogen that were very intensive natural gas users. Maybe one last reflection on applicability of hydrogen to the distribution grid. Questions, of course, will we ever get to a system where we have as developed distribution grids for hydrogen as what we had for natural gas? I think there will be other solutions for households, residential, and even commercial buildings than what we have today for natural gas. I leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, back to ENTSOG, Claude. I think there were.
Yeah, thank you. And
raised a lot of questions.
What Annie said, and then I will pick up the ITC question, the second one. Yeah, it seems to me like in the Renewable Energy Directive discussion, we spent 20 years of liberalization to move away from physical flow, and now we want to move in the opposite direction and in a pipe separate natural gas from low carbon and from renewable gases. Whereas we propose that we should use the benefit of the liberalization to have a deep, large market to incentive renewable and low carbon production, and to have a commodity market and a climate value market with a guarantee of origin, maybe a more robust one with the greenhouse gas emission, the sustainability certificate attached to it. And again, in my example, a biomethane producer on a DSO network can already sell its guarantee of origin in Europe or in another country. They do not need the reverse flow they do not need to buy capacity at the border to go there. And so that's my second point. We should maybe split the issue to solve the issue. And again, it seems to me that we put together the promotion of renewable gases and maybe a follow-up of Covadis. And then I'm coming to the second question on ITC mechanism. What's the aim there? Is it to have the same wholesale market price in Europe for hydrogen in Covadis? Or like Alberto mentioned in electricity, it's to have a mechanism to finance new interconnection between member states. And depending on the answer of what we want to achieve, the response could be different, because indeed in electricity we have PCI funds. We also have a cross-border cost allocation mechanism. And so maybe the ITC mechanism is not needed for that. If it's to have the same wholesale price everywhere, we already discussed that in the Covadis, but we can start the debate again. And going back to the poll, yeah, it will be very difficult to implement because the share of renewable gases will change all the time, the flow pattern, the development of the hydrogen network, and what will be the lead time to be compensated for that. And as someone said, it will be put on the exit tariff to household or exit tariff of end user, and it will change all the time. And this could be a disincentive for the gas network and for the hydrogen network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have now an intervention from Tom Maes from the CREG, who I think as a regulator will have some interesting views on the debate so far. Tom.
Yes, thank you, Leigh, and good afternoon all. No, indeed, I think in order to promote the uptake of hydrogen, low carbon gases and renewable gases, the EC has maybe chosen the shortest route, but not the most evident one. And luckily, details will be set later on in network codes and in delegated acts. Luckily, there is also a review clause and a lot of monitoring, because I think this will be needed in order to overcome some of the concerns and questions that have been raised during today's debate. There is clearly a top-down European single approach, so not a regional one. There is also a lot of emphasis put on the effect that discounts can play with regard to the uptake of those renewable and low carbon gases. Although in respect to the price difference that those gases still face with conventional natural gas, I think there is much more to do than simply putting discounts on network tariffs. So, of course, and it was clear from the poll that an ITC system is far from obvious, also for these gases, given their, in the beginning, a local level, so not really crossing borders. And as a last part, I think, and that's a very sound principle also that we as regulators have always put forward, is that support mechanisms by the use of network tariffs is not the most ideal one or not the most economically sound measure. And I think that was also clear from the poll, the third question, that in such cases, public budget or general funds is a more appropriate way to stimulate the uptake of these gases and to reach the climate goals in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Alberto, would you like to add any comments, having listened to the various?
Maybe I can pick one before we close. Maybe I'll pick one question which I don't think has been addressed so far, and it's about sort of the trading of sustainability certificates, which is supposed to run separately from the trading of the underlying commodity. And then the question is, who will get the discount? The holder of the certificate, or the owner of the commodity? Also keeping in mind that the commodity and the certificate may change hands several times. Maybe this is the last question that we address, and I don't know who wants. I'm looking for one volunteer to address this, and then we wrap it up. I don't know if Feodora and Benedikt are happy to take it, because it's to do, I guess, mostly with the Commission's proposal.
Yes, so I think these are indeed.
We hardly hear you.
Yes,
Feodora.
like this?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes.
much better.
Okay, so I think these are indeed tricky questions, and I think, as my colleague Benedikt pointed out before, a lot of this, we set the let's say the incentive, the discounts, the conditions, which the certificates, and the shortest possible route. And how this will be organized is indeed at this point in time not entirely clear, and will have to be agreed within network codes and implementing measures, etc. So there is indeed a lot of the implementation will still need to develop and become clearer in the process. And yes, I think we're very curious ourselves to see how our proposals will evolve over the interinstitutional process, and follow this very closely. But I would say indeed there is a lot in the implementation that will still have to happen.
Thank you very much, Feodora. Leigh, any final word from your side?
Yes, I was intrigued by the reflection that third country suppliers of hydrogen could inject into the European system, pay nothing, and then take it out in another third country, so that in fact they would be able to use the entire European network of the future for free. Is that correct? Is that the right takeaway?
Well, things like. Feodora, do you want to comment on this?
Yes, this is the way the rules are proposed. We wonder how many people would really be interested in doing that, but yes.
Interesting. I wonder if the new Minister for Brexit Affairs in the UK is tuning in today. That would be something maybe happy to hear. One of the hidden benefits of Brexit for the UK. No, that was, I think, for me, a fascinating debate. I'm also intrigued by the top-down approach, and the fact that the explanatory memo says, everybody, well, not many stakeholders were in favor of this tariff reduction system, but it seems that it's evolved into a rather elaborate set of proposals nonetheless. So it's, I suppose, very much driven by what happened with electricity, that we've had, of course, special tariffs for renewables, special connection rights, etc. So perhaps from the renewable electricity sector, there are parallels that have been drawn upon for this new set of proposals for renewable gas. But I think what we've heard today is perhaps a lot of reminders that the market's different. And so there will be quite a long way to travel to get the system up and running in an ideal way. I think that's my takeaway so far. But I'd like to thank everyone for a really stimulating discussion today, and for exploring this really new and novel area. So there's still, I think, a lot to be digested in this course of reflection for all the players involved. So thank you very much indeed to the Commission officials for having participated today, and I hope indeed it was useful. to you in thinking about how the draft is being received. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for contributing to a very rich discussion indeed. And so turn the floor back to Alberto. Do you have any final words you would like to say?
No, I think it's. I think there's been a very lively debate. I think it has shown that there is still a lot of work. I think the Commission put out very interesting proposals, but obviously it's a new area, and it's quite an ambitious proposal in some respect. And as always, things will have to be worked out. I think I don't attempt to draw conclusions, except that more work is needed, and this will be the task for many of us in the coming months. I guess it's left to me to thank all the participants. We have had a large number of participants today, but also the speaker, Feodora, Benedikt, our own Ilaria, Csilla, Annie, Claude, Peter, and then Tom. Well, thanks to Leigh for always work with me in organizing this series. The next one of these series, the debate series, will be in a month's time. In 4 weeks' time, it will be about the retail market. We look at completely different issues. We look at recent developments in retail markets, and we ask ourselves whether liberalization of the retail market has worked, given the fact that in some countries, consumers seem to be reluctant to take advantage of that. On the other series, next Wednesday, we will have an insight on lessons from energy policy failures, ensuring energy justice, and the good governance by indicator. It will be organized by our colleague Lucila de Almeida, and it will have 2 editors of energy policy being interviewed. Last but never least, thanks a lot to Chiara on the background. And without her, nothing like this would have happened. So thanks a lot to Chiara. Thanks a lot to everyone. And well, until next month and next week, for those who are interested in failures in energy policy and good governance by indicators.